The fluorescent hum of the immigration detention holding facility is a constant companion, a thin, high whine that stitches itself into the fabric of your days. You trace the rim of a lukewarm coffee mug, the ceramic rough beneath your thumb, a testament to countless similar mornings. Your gaze drifts past the chipped formica counter, over the sterile linoleum, to the faces beyond the reinforced glass, weary, hopeful, desperate. This is your world now, Marcus Thorne, a quiet purgatory where the only cases you handle involve misplaced documents and the bureaucratic maze of human longing. The badge, once a gleaming promise pinned to your chest, now resides in a forgotten drawer, tarnished by the ghost of a name, Elena Petrova. The journalist. The brilliant, fiery voice silenced too soon, her murder a cold echo in the hollow chambers of your memory. You remember the sterile white sheets, the hushed whispers of colleagues, the way the truth slipped through your fingers like smoke. They called it random, a tragic consequence of urban decay. You knew better. You still do. The shame of that failure, the quiet dismissal, the erosion of your reputation, it's a scar tissue over your very soul, thick and unyielding. A tremor runs through the air, not physical, but a subtle shift in the facility's monotonous rhythm. The heavy door leading from the outside world grinds open, spilling a rectangle of gray morning light across the floor. A figure steps into the harsh glow, distinct from the usual procession of lawyers and social workers. He is an elegant woman, her tailored suit a stark contrast to the drab uniforms and worn clothing that usually populate this space. Her posture speaks of purpose, her eyes, even from this distance, hold an unnerving clarity, a sharp intelligence that cuts through the haze of your self-imposed exile. You watch her approach the desk, her heels clicking a precise rhythm on the linoleum. The intake officer, usually a fortress of unyielding procedure, seems momentarily flustered, leaning in to listen to her hushed words. A moment later, the officer's eyes flick to you, a question, a flicker of something akin to pity. You brace yourself. The world you left behind rarely seeks you out for pleasantries. The woman turns, her gaze finding yours with unnerving precision. You feel it, a prickle of recognition, a tightening in your chest. The bitter liquid coats your tongue, mirroring the taste of suspicion. You know her. Not personally, but by reputation. What business could she possibly have with you, a man stripped of his authority, scrubbing the grime of bureaucratic indifference? You look well, she continues, her eyes sweeping over your tired face, the lines etched around your eyes, the slight slump of your shoulders. She smiles, a thin, mirthless curve of her lips. Considering the dust that has settled. The way some cases refuse to die, no matter how deeply they're buried. Your grip tightens on the mug. Elena Petrova. Her case has resurfaced, Marcus. A jolt, sharp and unwelcome, shoots through you. You feel the old hunger, the forgotten fire, stir in the ashes of your disillusionment. It was closed, you state, forcing a neutral tone. A random act. A convenient narrative, she counters, her eyes never leaving yours. One that served many interests at the time. But now, new information has come to light. Information linking her investigation, her final days, to a prominent politician's current presidential campaign. This is not a casual visit. This is a detonation. Why me, you ask, the words a raw protest against the unfairness of it all. You, the man who failed. The man who lost everything because of that very case. Because you were there, Marcus, she replies, her voice softening slightly, a calculated vulnerability. You saw what others refused to. You carried the weight of it. And because, despite everything, you were still the only one who truly believed it was more than just a random act. She reaches into her elegant leather briefcase, withdrawing a slim, unmarked folder. The paper is crisp, the corners sharp. It's heavy with unspoken truths. He slides it across the counter. This is your chance, Marcus Thorne, he says, his gaze unwavering. A chance at redemption. To finish what you started. To expose what they tried to bury. The people involved are dangerous, ruthless. But the truth, if you can find it, will shake the very foundations of this city, and perhaps, this country. You look at the folder, then at her, then back at the folder. The weight of it seems to expand, pressing down on the small, isolated world you've built for yourself. The hum of the facility, the distant chatter, the despair of the detainees, it all recedes. The world you thought you'd escaped is pulling you back, its tendrils wrapped around your very being, and you feel the old, familiar tension coil deep within you, a predator waking from a long, bitter slumber. The folder, a simple manila creation, pulsed with a silent, ancient rhythm against the scarred wood of the desk. Your gaze, heavy with the weight of years and failures, drifted from the thick sheaf of papers to the colleague who stood opposite. Her posture a precise blend of expectation and calculated detachment. It's not just a ghost, Marcus, she said, her voice a low murmur that barely cut through the distant. Muffled pleas filtering from the processing areas. It's a chance. A door, perhaps, to something resembling closure. Closure. The word felt brittle on your tongue, tasting of ash. You knew better than to trust such promises. Closure was a myth, a neat ending reserved for fictions, not for the jagged edges of a life lived in regret. Yet, beneath the layers of cynicism and self-imposed exile, a faint ember flickered. Not hope, not yet. More like a persistent itch, a phantom limb ache for the justice you once believed in, the justice you'd failed to deliver. The name of the brilliant investigative journalist, etched in your memory as vividly as the day you'd first seen the crime scene photos, whispered from the pages. Dismissed as random, then forgotten. But not by you. You reached out, your fingers tracing the worn edges of the folder. The paper felt cool, almost alive, under your touch. Why now, you asked, the question a rasp against your throat. After all these years? Her eyes, sharp and unwavering, met yours. The currents shift, Marcus. New tides reveal old wreckage. A prominent politician's campaign, a sudden surge in public interest regarding certain historical injustices. And a whisper, a persistent echo, connecting the journalist's work to something far larger than a street-level mugging gone wrong. She offered no more, her silence a deliberate wall. You knew the game. Information, carefully doled out, designed to pique curiosity, to hook the old instincts. It was a bait you knew you should refuse, a trap you'd fallen into before. Everything we could scrape together from the archives, plus a few recent additions. She gestured to a large, sealed container beside the desk, a utilitarian plastic crate usually reserved for detainee belongings, now overflowing with binders and paper. It's all yours. Consider this. Your new assignment. The weight of the folder in your hands grew heavier still, now joined by the metaphorical tonnage of the crate. You wheeled the crate on a rickety hand truck to your small, cramped office, a space carved out of a former storage closet, smelling faintly of stale coffee and forgotten despair. The air was thick with the silent hum of the building's ventilation system, a constant drone that usually served to insulate you from the world. With a grunt, you lifted the first heavy binder from the crate, its cover yellowed with age, its spine cracked. Case file, Thorne, M. Journalist murder. Your name, a stark reminder of who you once were, what you once stood for. You spread the contents across the cluttered desk, a mosaic of faded photographs, meticulous police reports, witness statements, and the journalist's own fragmented notes. The photographs were the hardest. The young, vibrant face of the journalist. Alive and smiling, then the stark, brutal reality of the crime scene. The alley, the scattered papers, the unnatural angle of the body. You began to read, methodically, relentlessly. Your eyes, trained over decades to sift through minutiae, absorbed every detail. The initial report, dismissing robbery as the motive. The lack of forced entry into the journalist's apartment. The absence of a struggle. The precise, almost surgical nature of the fatal wound. Then you found it. Tucked away in a supplementary report, almost an afterthought, a brief mention of a discarded burner phone found several blocks from the scene. It had been wiped clean, no discernible data. But the brand, a niche foreign model, struck a discordant note. You remembered a similar model, a fleeting image from a long-forgotten investigation, an obscure piece of equipment favored by a specific type of clandestine operator. Your gaze drifted to the journalist's personal effects list. A worn leather-bound notebook, half-filled with cryptic shorthand and dates. You flipped through the old crime scene photos again, focusing on the background details. A flyer, partially obscured by debris, for a rally held by the very politician your colleague had mentioned. A small, almost invisible detail in a corner of one shot, easily dismissed as background noise. But now, it resonated with a new, unsettling clarity. The journalist's last known movements. A meeting with an anonymous source in a downtown cafe, just hours before the murder. It suggested someone who knew how to disappear, how to blend, how to leave no trace. The pieces, once disparate and unrelated, were beginning to align. Not a random act of violence. Not a simple robbery. This was precise, deliberate, and connected. The journalist hadn't just been reporting on local corruption, they had been digging into something far deeper, something reaching into the very core of power, touching the campaign of a man poised to ascend to the highest office. The air in your small office grew heavy, thick with the scent of old paper and the burgeoning thread of a truth you were only just beginning to uncover. The ghost was not merely a memory, it was a living, breathing menace, and it had found you again. The raw concrete and stale air receded, replaced by the city's humid exhale, a familiar, gritty breath that always clung to your skin. You were back on the street, the folder a burning weight, the promise of redemption a flickering, dangerous flame in the vast urban sprawl. The journalist's apartment building stood as a monument to forgotten tragedies, a skeletal structure of faded brick and peeling paint in a neighborhood that had since gentrified around it, leaving this one relic stubbornly untouched. 7 years had spun their web across its facade, draping the windows in a fine layer of dust, erasing the urgency of that night. You remembered the sharp police tape, the flashing blue and red, the collective gasp of the street. Now, only a silence hung, heavy and indifferent. You had to talk your way past the current building superintendent, a stoic woman with tired eyes and a suspicion that cut deeper than any blade. You spoke of old cases, of closure, of the need to simply see this space one more time. A folded 20, discreetly offered, loosened the knot in her jaw. She watched you ascend the creaking stairs, her gaze a physical weight between your shoulder blades. The apartment itself was a mausoleum of dust motes dancing in the meager light. The furniture, covered in white sheets, resembled draped ghosts. The scent of stale air and old paper clung to the silence. You walked its perimeter, a phantom in your own memory, retracing steps that were never yours to take. The overturned chair, the scattered papers, the single coffee mug, all frozen in time. Your gaze fell upon the desk, a sturdy oak slab that had once groaned under the weight of research, now merely a pedestal for neglect. You remembered the initial sweep, meticulous but ultimately fruitless. What could they have missed? You ran your fingers along its polished surface, feeling the ghost of his presence. Then, your thumb caught on something, a subtle roughness along the underside of the top drawer. Not a splinter, but a small, expertly carved indentation. You pressed. A tiny click echoed in the stillness. A narrow compartment, no wider than your finger, slid open. Inside, nestled in the accumulated dust, was a single, tarnished brass locket. It was heavy, warm from your touch, and devoid of any engraving. It seemed utterly out of place amidst the journalist's usually Spartan possessions. You pried it open with a fingernail, revealing not a photograph, but a tightly rolled fragment of parchment. Unfurling it with painstaking care, you found two words, meticulously penned in a tight, precise hand, the architect. Below it, a single, stark symbol, an interlocking triple spiral. The architect. Not a name, but a title, a designation. And that symbol, alien to your memory, yet undeniably deliberate. This was the journalist's final message, hidden in plain sight, a breadcrumb for a ghost. You pocketed the locket, the weight of it a tangible link to the past. You had found a thread. The next stop was the newsroom, a buzzing hive of screens and hurried voices that felt a lifetime away from the quiet desolation of the apartment. You sought out an old colleague of the deceased journalist, a veteran reporter whose hair had gone mostly silver since you last saw him. He sat hunched over a keyboard, his fingers a blur. Marcus Thorne, you stated, your voice cutting through the clatter. He froze, his head slowly rising. Thought you were off the grid. A ghost, maybe, you offered, a wry twist to your lips. I'm looking into the old case. Frozen solid. He leaned closer, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial murmur. Walk away, Thorne. Seriously. It's not worth it. Some things are better left buried. Buried with a locket and a cryptic message, you countered, the words a challenge. Brilliant mind. But he was digging in places he shouldn't have. Places with very deep foundations. Don't repeat his mistake. He pushed himself away from his desk, standing abruptly. I have a deadline. Important one. The dismissal was clear, but the fear in his eyes was clearer still. Deep foundations. The architect. Your next lead took you to a small, nondescript office above a noisy deli, where a retired police records keeper spent his afternoons filing ancient documents. He was a man of meticulous habits, known for his encyclopedic memory of cases long forgotten. You found him surrounded by teetering stacks of folders, the smell of aged paper and stale coffee thick in the air. Marcus Thorne. he mumbled, without looking up from a ledger. "Haven't seen you in a long time." His tone was flat, devoid of surprise. As if he expected all ghosts to eventually return. "I need to revisit the journalist's file, the original one you requested." "Specifically, any oddities? Something that might have been dismissed as insignificant at the time." He sighed, a long, wheezing sound, and slowly closed the ledger. His eyes, rheumy and clouded, met yours. "Son, that case was closed for a reason. Higher-ups. Political pressure. You know how it goes. Tell me what you remember." Then, you pressed. "Anything out of place?" He leaned back in his creaking chair, rubbing a hand over his bald head. "There was a phone call. Anonymous. Came in a few days after the body was found." "Investigate it?" He shrugged, a dismissive gesture. "Was logged, sure. But the higher-ups. They said it was a crank call. Said it didn't fit the narrative. Random act of violence, remember? No conspiracy. That was the official line." His gaze hardened, losing some of its weariness. "You start digging there, Thorne, you won't just find dirt. You'll find concrete. And concrete tends to bury whatever gets in its way." The message was unambiguous. The journalist had been close to something monumental, something that had been ruthlessly suppressed. And now, merely by turning over a few old stones, you had attracted the attention of those very same forces. You were no longer just chasing a ghost, you were disturbing a sleeping beast. The city's hum, once a familiar rhythm, now throbbed with a predatory pulse, a low growl beneath the surface of streetlights and distant sirens. The message, stark and chilling, clung to you like a shroud woven from cold air and the scent of old paper. You understood then, with a clarity that cut through the years of self-doubt, the journalist had not merely stumbled, he had been pushed, violently, from the precipice of a truth too dangerous to whisper. And now, you were tracing her final, perilous steps. You immersed yourself in her meticulous shorthand, her cross-referenced articles, the margins filled with furious annotations. Her research wasn't just about exposing corruption, it was about unraveling a tapestry of influence, thread by thread. Your fingers traced a name, recurring with insidious frequency, Aegis Global Holdings. It appeared in her notes on campaign finance reports, in obscure land deals, and, most disturbingly, in the context of government contracts. This wasn't just a company, it was a hydra, its tendrils reaching into every facet of the city's infrastructure, and beyond. Then, a breakthrough. Tucked within a sheaf of documents detailing the politicians' recent policy proposals, you found a memo. It was a subtle, almost innocuous thing, referencing a public-private partnership for the management of secure facilities. The journalist had circled a specific clause, scribbling a single, damning question mark next to it. The pieces, disparate at first glance, began to click into a sinister whole. Inside, the bureaucracy was a labyrinth of clipped tones and indifferent gazes. You presented your old, unofficial credentials, a relic of a past life, hoping it would grant you some semblance of authority. The desk officer, a man whose face was as impassive as the concrete walls, looked at you with an unblinking stare. "I'm here regarding a historical inquiry," you began, your voice carefully modulated, related to the late journalist, victim's name, if allowed to be named, but since not, I'll avoid. He was investigating certain operational contracts, specifically concerning Aegis Global Holdings, around the time of her disappearance. The officer's eyes flickered, a subtle shift in his otherwise blank expression. "We have no record of any such investigation, nor any visitor logs for the individual you named. Our contracts are proprietary and not subject to external review." His words were rote, rehearsed, yet the flicker in his eyes betrayed a deeper knowledge, a practiced denial. "You pushed, gently." Her notes suggest he was looking into an incident, perhaps a transfer of detainees, or a specific financial discrepancy tied to an Aegis contract. She mentioned an internal audit. All audits are confidential. You'll need a court order for any information, which I doubt you possess. He gestured vaguely towards a frosted glass door. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have duties to attend to." Defeated, but not empty-handed, you turned to leave. The officer's reaction, the immediate and absolute denial, was itself a confirmation. The journalist had been here. She had found something. And they were still protecting it. The wind whipped around the facility's perimeter, carrying with it a faint, metallic tang. You pulled out of the parking lot, merging onto the desolate access road that snaked away from the facility. The road was lined with sparse, skeletal trees, their branches clawing at the gray sky. Ahead, the road curved sharply, disappearing behind a thick stand of pines. As you rounded the bend, a sudden, blinding flash erupted in your rearview mirror. It wasn't just following, it was closing in, its headlights like hungry eyes. You gripped the steering wheel, your knuckles white. The sedan swerved, its intention clear. It wasn't a warning, it was an execution. You floored the accelerator, the old engine protesting, but responding. The gap between your car and theirs narrowed, the roar of their engine now a guttural snarl behind you. The impact jolted through you, throwing your head against the headrest. You fought for control, the car fishtailing wildly. Another hit, harder this time, pushing you towards the roadside ditch, a jagged line of rocks waiting to tear through your tires. This wasn't about redemption anymore, it was about survival. With a desperate surge of adrenaline, you swerved hard to the left, feigning a loss of control, then sharply to the right. The unexpected maneuver caught your pursuer off guard. Their sedan, momentarily overcorrecting, veered slightly, just enough. You saw your chance. You stomped on the brake, then released it, simultaneously yanking the wheel. Your car spun, a controlled chaos, throwing up gravel and dust. In that fleeting window, you slammed the accelerator again, veering off the main road onto a barely visible dirt track that led into the dense woods. The branches whipped against the windshield, scraping along the sides of the car, but you didn't slow. You didn't dare. You drove until the sound of their engine faded into the wind, until the trees swallowed the last vestiges of the road, until the only sound was your own ragged breath and the frantic thumping against your ribs. You stopped the car, engine still running, and leaned back, eyes closed, the taste of metallic fear sharp on your tongue. They knew. The stakes had just been irrevocably raised. The journalist had paid the ultimate price for this knowledge. You understood now, with a terrifying certainty, that you were next in line. The officer's immediate and absolute denial, a wall built of practiced dismissal, still echoed in your mind as you walked back to the vehicle. The sky, a bruised canvas of deep purple and charcoal, mirrored the disquiet settling within you. The journalist, she had been there. She had found something. And they were still protecting it, a truth buried beneath layers of bureaucratic stone. You slid into the driver's seat, the worn leather cool against your back. The engine grumbled to life, a low, constant thrum beneath your hands. Your fingers tapped a restless rhythm on the steering wheel, each beat a question. What had she been seeking? What had she unearthed that warranted such a fierce, almost desperate, silence? You remembered the brittle newsprint, the faded photographs of the journalist, her eyes bright with a relentless curiosity. Elena! A witness from a drug trafficking case, years ago, when your badge still gleamed with unblemished promise. You had interviewed her, a young woman then, terrified and speaking in hushed, broken English. He had claimed to have seen something more, something beyond the street-level dealers, something about men in suits and hidden ledgers. You, focused on the immediate arrests, had dismissed her claims as the ramblings of a traumatized immigrant, eager to please, perhaps exaggerating for protection. You had noted it, filed it away, then moved on. The case closed, the perpetrators jailed. Or so you thought. Why would the journalist be looking into Elena Petrova? Elena Petrova, listed as a person of interest in a more recent, low-profile investigation into undocumented labor exploitation. The connection hit you with the force of a physical blow. The journalist, relentless in her pursuit of truth, must have stumbled upon Elena's story again, perhaps seeing the pattern you had missed, the deeper currents flowing beneath the surface. And you, Marcus Thorne, had been there, had held a piece of that puzzle in your hands, and had let it slip through your fingers, dismissing it as inconsequential. The facility itself loomed, a concrete monolith under the bruised sky, its high fences topped with razor wire glinting malevolently in the pale glow of floodlights. It was a place designed for containment, for anonymity, for stories to be swallowed whole. Your hand went to the worn leather of your wallet, feeling the weight of the old badge, a reminder of what you once were, and what you desperately sought to reclaim. Inside, the air was thick, with the scent of disinfectant and suppressed despair. The waiting area was sparse, institutional. A lone officer, a burly man with a perpetually furrowed brow, sat behind a reinforced glass partition, his uniform crisp, his gaze weary. Marcus Thorne, you stated, your voice gravelly, I need to speak with the detainee, Elena Petrova. I believe she may have information relevant to an ongoing investigation. The officer's eyes, dull moments before, sharpened. He ran a hand over his close-cropped hair, a nervous gesture. Petrova, you say? She's a journalist who is now deceased. His eyes flickered, a momentary tremor betraying his composure. He hesitated, then leaned closer to the microphone, his voice dropping. Look, Thorne, I remember you. From the old days. You're not officially cleared for this, are you? This isn't your jurisdiction anymore. The familiarity, the use of your name, was a subtle hook. You recognized him now, an officer from your old precinct, a gruff but generally decent man, transferred here years ago after a minor disciplinary incident. This journalist, he was looking into something big. Something that could implicate powerful people. And Elena Petrova is connected. The officer's gaze shifted, darting towards the cameras mounted in the corners of the room, then back to you. His jaw tightened. Petrova. He was released. A few days ago. On a technicality. Transferred to a resettlement program. Confidential. A resettlement program. The words hung in the air, too neat, too convenient. Elena Petrova, a key witness you'd once overlooked, a woman the journalist had sought, suddenly vanished into the bureaucratic ether. It reeked of a cleanup, a deliberate erasure. Transferred where, officer, you pushed, your voice low, dangerous. Give me the details. You know I won't let this go. He sighed, a heavy, defeated sound. He pulled a form from a stack, his finger tracing a line on it. It says here. He was sponsored by a charity organization. They have a new initiative for immigrant welfare. It's all above board, Thorne. Just don't stir up trouble. The blood drained from your face. The politician. The presidential campaign. Elena Petrova, the forgotten witness, now under the care of an organization directly linked to the very man the journalist was investigating. Betrayal. It wasn't just the system that had failed you, or your own past blindness. It was a network, insidious and far-reaching, that had used your own history against you, that had twisted the fates of people like Elena Petrova into their grand, corrupt design. The officer wasn't just misleading you, he was a cog in the machine, perhaps unwillingly, perhaps out of fear, but a cog nonetheless. You looked at the officer, his face a mask of practiced indifference now, the momentary flicker of humanity extinguished. He knew more. He was protecting more than just a protocol. He was protecting himself, and perhaps, by extension, the very corruption you were trying to unearth. The journalist had found Elena. He had found the link, the thread connecting your past oversight to the politician's present power. And in doing so, he had sealed her own fate. And now, you were stepping into that same dangerous current, feeling the pull of personal responsibility, of a debt unpaid. The truth, now tinged with the bitter taste of betrayal, demanded to be exhumed. The fight had just become intensely personal. The blood drained from your face, leaving your skin taut and cold. The politician. The presidential campaign. And the officer, a man you had known, was feeding you this carefully constructed truth, a delicate thread spun amidst a tapestry of lies. His eyes, usually a placid gray, held a glint of desperate urgency as he spoke, his voice a low thrum against the hum of the city. They move fast, Marcus. Like shadows that breed shadows. His gaze flickered to a chipped mug on the counter, then back to you. Some disappearances aren't meant to be solved by the usual channels. Some cases. A breadcrumb, then. A dangerous, potent crumb. You saw the intricate web. Now, the invisible strands connecting the forgotten journalist to the gleaming towers of power. The officer, a reluctant player, had given you a choice: walk away, or step into the maw of the beast. Your jaw tightened. There was no walking away. Not anymore. A silent sentinel of forgotten lives. You bypassed the main entrance, your old skills a muscle memory, guiding you to a less conspicuous service gate. A quick, practiced manipulation of a rusted latch, a silent slip past a disused loading dock, and you were inside. The interior was a labyrinth of echoing corridors, each identical door a silent promise of anonymity. A faint light bled from beneath a door marked Secure Archives, authorized personnel only. A familiar hum of electronics emanated from within. This was it. Your breath hitched, a knot of anticipation tightening in your chest. The lock, a basic digital keypad, yielded to a sequence you recalled from a long-forgotten training exercise, a universal maintenance code, rarely changed in facilities built decades ago. The door clicked open with a soft sigh. A single desk lamp cast a pool of sickly yellow light over a desktop computer, its screen displaying an open file, Petrova, Elena, Special Observation. Your fingers trembled as you moved the mouse, scrolling through the entries. Dates, times, brief notations. Standard procedure, until you hit a section marked Visitor Logs, High Priority. Your gaze snagged on a name, then another, a series of aliases you recognized from the journalist's own meticulous notes, aliases connected to the presidential campaign's inner circle. And then, a direct reference request for expedited transfer of Petrova, E, to off-site location. Initiated by Sentinel Group, Liaison, C. Thorne. Your own family name. He was alive, and he was involved. This wasn't just a political cover-up, it was a deeply personal betrayal, a twist of the knife that cut to the very bone of your past. You scrolled further, each entry a hammer blow. There, dated days before the journalist's murder interrogation of Petrova, E, regarding unauthorized contact with freelance journalist. Orders received to neutralize potential leak. It was all here, laid bare in the sterile glow of the screen. The air grew thick, pressing in on you. This was not just a case anymore, it was a war, and you were standing on the precipice of its true horror. The evidence was irrefutable, damning. A digital ledger of corruption, murder, and the meticulous unraveling of a life. You copied the files, a torrent of data flowing onto a small, encrypted drive you carried. Each kilobyte was a promise, a vow. A sudden, sharp clang echoed from the corridor outside, followed by the scuff of heavy boots. They knew you were here. Your heart, once a dull throb, now hammered against your ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the encroaching danger. You had the truth. The full, agonizing truth. And with it came an unshakable resolve. There was no turning back, no hiding from the storm you had just unearthed. Marcus Thorne, disgraced detective, was dead. In his place stood a man forged in the crucible of betrayal and righteous fury, ready to tear down the foundations of their power, brick by bloody brick. The hunt had just begun. The name, C. Thorne, a phantom whispered into the quiet corners of your lineage, now burned with the stark clarity of a brand. Your own blood, twisted into the knot of this sprawling deception. The cold dread that had gripped you moments before now receded, replaced by a furious, determined fire. This was no longer just a quest for justice, it was a reckoning. A silent promise solidified in the marrow of your bones, you would unravel this, no matter the cost. The air in your makeshift sanctuary, a borrowed garret above a shuttered bakery, suddenly felt thin, charged with an unseen current. A tremor ran through the floorboards, not from the street below, but from an instinct, sharp and unforgiving. You moved to the grimy window, peering through the rain-streaked pane. A black sedan, too sleek, too still, idled a block away. Its windows were tinted, opaque eyes watching. They knew. The revelation of C. Thorne's involvement, however you'd gleaned it, had sent ripples through their carefully constructed silence. You were no longer merely digging, you were a threat. A low thrum vibrated in the distant concrete, growing louder. Not sirens, but the heavy, deliberate approach of something more formidable. Time evaporated. Your bag, already packed with essentials, felt heavy in your grasp. They weren't coming for questions. They were coming for you. You didn't hesitate. The back staircase, a rickety wooden spine against the building's rear, groaned under your weight as you descended. Each step was a silent prayer, a gamble against the creaking wood and your own hurried breath. The alley was a tunnel of refuse and damp air. You moved with a predator's grace, a ghost in the urban decay, your senses stretched taut, absorbing every rustle, every distant siren's wail that now seemed to sing your name. You emerged onto a busier street, melting into the flow of evening commuters, a face in the faceless crowd. The city swallowed you whole, its indifferent pulse a temporary shield. But the hunt had begun. He gave you a brief, assessing glance in the rearview mirror, then nodded, the meter clicking into motion. The facility loomed on the city's industrial edge, a brutalist monolith of gray concrete and steel mesh, stark against the bruised twilight sky. High fences topped with coiled wire glinted under the harsh spotlights. It was a place designed for containment, a fortress of forgotten lives. Thorne in another life, another operation. A man named Elias. The air here was thick with the tang of ozone and stale desperation. A patrol vehicle, slow and methodical, cruised past the main gate. You flattened yourself against a derelict cargo container, its corrugated metal cool against your cheek. The security was tight, but not impenetrable. Elias was your only thread, a fragile connection to a past Thorne had tried to bury. A service entrance, left ajar by a distracted guard on a smoke break, offered a fleeting opportunity. You navigated the labyrinthine passages, guided by the muffled sounds of distant voices and the occasional clatter of keys. The holding cells were arranged in stark, symmetrical rows. You scanned the numbers, your heart a drum against your ribs. Then, you saw it, B-17. Elias. He sat hunched on a thin cot, his face etched with weariness, his eyes like distant embers. Or worse. Not yet, Elias. I need to know about Thorne and the journalist. What was the connection? You pressed, urgency lacing your words. The name. The operation. Thorne. He was the architect. The journalist, she found the blueprint. He paused, a shiver running through him. The Project Chimera. That's what they called it. A network of influence, built on stolen data, forged identities, planted narratives. All designed to elevate their chosen candidate. Thorne built the framework, Marcus. A willing one, but a puppet nonetheless. Thorne's masterpiece. The journalist was about to expose the entire thing. He had the proof, the names, the dates. Thorne. He believes in this. He believes he's building a new order. And he will eliminate anyone who stands in his way. Anyone. A sudden, sharp clang echoed from the far end of the corridor. Footsteps, heavy and deliberate, grew louder. They were coming. The proof, you urged, where did she hide it? Elias shook his head, desperation clouding his features. She never told me directly. Only that it was somewhere safe, somewhere no one would ever think to look. A place tied to her past, to her earliest days as a journalist. The footsteps were closer now, accompanied by the low murmur of voices. You heard your name, distorted but unmistakable, carried on the sterile air. The net had tightened. Your face, your mission, had been broadcast. Project Chimera. The politician. the journalist's past. A guard rounded the corner, his eyes widening as he saw you. "Hey! You! You didn't wait." You turned, sprinting down the corridor, the guard's shout echoing behind you, now joined by others. The facility, once a place of quiet desperation, erupted into chaos. Alarms blared, red lights strobed, painting the sterile walls in urgent, pulsing hues. You burst back through the service entrance, the cool night air a sudden shock against your skin. Outside, the perimeter was alive with movement. A vehicle screeched to a halt near the main gate, doors flying open. You were exposed, a solitary figure against the overwhelming force of their pursuit. But you were also armed, not with a weapon, but with a name, Project Chimera. A new piece of the puzzle, a terrifying confirmation of the depths of Thorne's betrayal. The chase was on, relentless and unforgiving, but you now carried a truth that could bring their entire carefully constructed world crashing down. The stakes had never been higher, and the path forward, though fraught with danger, was terrifyingly clear. You burst through the service entrance, the chill night air a sudden, brutal shock against skin still clammy from the humid corridors. Shouts, distant and then closer, whipped at your back like unseen whips. You didn't look back. Your breath came in ragged gulps, each one a sharp blade in your lungs, but the adrenaline coursing through your veins was a fiercer fire. The images from within the facility, the hushed words of the elder detainee, the fleeting glimpse of a coded ledger page on a guard's console, they spun in your mind, a chaotic kaleidoscope of half-truths and grim possibilities. The phrase burrowed into your thoughts, a persistent burr. It was a cryptic echo, resonating with a detail you'd unearthed weeks ago. The murdered journalist had a peculiar affinity for antique timepieces, often using them as metaphors in their articles. A specific clock, mentioned in one of their earliest, most obscure pieces, began to solidify in your memory. It wasn't just a clock, it was a landmark, a meeting point, a place of personal significance to the journalist. An old, ornate grandfather clock stood sentinel in the dust-choked lobby of a forgotten library, a public building the journalist had frequented. Could the clock's eye be a physical hiding place? A vault of truth, waiting for the right gaze? The city lights blurred as you commandeered an idling sedan, the keys left foolishly in the ignition. A desperate act, but necessity wore a harsh cloak tonight. You reached the old municipal library just as the first tendrils of dawn began to paint the sky a bruised purple. The air inside was thick with the scent of aged paper and decay. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light piercing the grimy windows, ethereal dancers in a silent tomb. Your footsteps echoed in the cavernous space, a lonely percussion against the hushed reverence of forgotten knowledge. There it stood, in the center of the lobby, shrouded in a linen sheet like a ghost, the grandfather clock. Its mahogany frame was scarred by time, its brass face tarnished, its hands frozen at 3:15. The elder detainee's words, the clock's eye, pulsed in your mind. Your fingers brushed against a barely perceptible seam near the numeral 12, a faint line that suggested a hidden compartment. With a grunt, you applied pressure, and a small, spring-loaded panel clicked open. Inside, nestled in a velvet pouch, was a single, unmarked data chip. It was small, unassuming, yet its weight in your palm felt monumental. This was it. This was the contingency. This was the event. You found a secure, isolated corner in an abandoned factory, its skeletal remains silhouetted against the morning sky, to access the chip. Your old, battered laptop whirred to life, its screen a pale rectangle of light in the gloom. You inserted the chip. A complex series of encrypted files unfolded. Financial records, shell corporations, offshore accounts, the usual architecture of corruption, all meticulously detailed. But then, you found it. Direct, unambiguous messages between the journalist and the campaign architect for the leading politician. The politician's closest confidant, the strategic mind behind their ascent, was the architect of a murder and a grand deception. The identity of the mastermind, clear and undeniable, solidified the entire, grotesque tapestry. You had it. All of it. Enough to bring down not just the campaign architect, but to expose the rot at the core of the politician's ascent. But possessing the truth was one thing, delivering it was another. They would come for you. They always did. You would not run. Not anymore. You would use the very proof you held as bait. A calculated risk, a deliberate step into the lion's den. You composed an anonymous, untraceable message, a single, cryptic sentence, embedding a tiny fragment of the irrefutable data as a signature. It mentioned the clock's eye, a private signal that only the campaign architect would recognize as a threat. You sent it to a secure, private channel known to be used by the politician's inner circle. The air in the abandoned factory grew heavier, charged with an electric tension. Your hand went to the worn grip of the pistol tucked into your waistband. The final pieces were in place. You waited. Your footsteps echoed on the polished linoleum, each sound a deliberate challenge to the oppressive quiet. The clock's eye. The phrase, a phantom limb of memory, pulsed in your mind, guiding you through the labyrinthine corridors. You moved with the coiled tension of a predator, every nerve alive, the weight of a decade's failures and a new hope for justice pressing on your shoulders. You found the office, a bland space furnished with utilitarian precision. The nameplate on the door read "The Overseer." No light spilled from beneath the door, yet a faint hum of electronics vibrated through the frame. You pushed it open, the latch clicking with an unexpected loudness. Inside, bathed in the soft glow of a single desk lamp, sat a figure you recognized from your earlier investigation into the politician's campaign finances, not the politician themselves, but a quiet, unassuming man you'd previously dismissed as a mere aide. His silver hair was meticulously combed, his suit impeccable even at this late hour. Beside him, on a small, antique mahogany side table, rested a grandfather clock, its pendulum stilled, its face a blank, unmoving gaze. He didn't rise. I expected you, eventually. The journalist was quite persistent, much like yourself. He gestured to the empty chair opposite him. Please. Join me. We have much to discuss. You remained standing, your gaze fixed on the clock, then on the man. You're the orchestrator, you stated, the words tasting like ash. The one pulling the strings behind the politician, behind this entire operation. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. A convenient title. I prefer unnecessary architect. The politician merely needed guidance, a steady hand to steer their ambition toward constructive ends. He leaned back, his eyes, dark and unblinking, holding yours. You've been digging in the wrong places, Marcus. Looking for a grand conspiracy when the truth is far simpler, far more pragmatic. Pragmatic? You scoffed, the sound sharp in the quiet room. You murdered a journalist who was about to expose your little enterprise. This facility, a front for something far more sinister than processing paperwork, isn't it? Your eyes swept across the room, searching for any tell, any crack in his composure. The journalist was getting close to how you were using this place, trafficking, money laundering, perhaps even worse. And they left a clue, didn't they? A final, damning piece of evidence. The orchestrator's smile broadened slightly. Ah, the journalist's flair for the dramatic. Always with the metaphors, the cryptic messages. The clock's eye. A clever misdirection, even from the grave. He tapped a manicured finger on the grandfather clock beside him. You think the evidence is within this timepiece, don't you? A trophy. And they used that to their advantage. Indeed. The orchestrator sighed, a sound of weary amusement. They were clever. Almost too clever. They did hide something. Not in this clock, no. This is merely a prop, a symbol of my appreciation for their tenacity. He paused, letting the words hang. The journalist installed a miniature camera, disguised as a lens, in the eye of a smaller, antique desk clock. A clock that sat on the desk of the administrator, the one who directly oversaw the facility's illicit operations. The one who was about to be exposed for using detention transfers as cover for human trafficking and for funneling campaign funds through ghost accounts. Your breath hitched. The pieces clicked into place with a sickening finality. The clock's eye wasn't the journalist's, but the camera's eye. It recorded everything. The administrator, your direct subordinate, was caught red-handed. And the politician was complicit, aware of the funds, aware of the transfers, turning a blind eye for political gain. Precisely, the orchestrator affirmed, his voice now devoid of any pretense of friendliness. The administrator was a loose end. The politician, a useful idiot. The journalist, an intolerable nuisance. Their exposure would have derailed everything. The campaign, the network, the years of careful cultivation. What serves the greater good, what maintains order, that is true justice. Uncovered so much. But you've also walked into a trap. No one leaves this facility with inconvenient truths. Your hand instinctively went to your jacket, feeling the hard edges of the small, encrypted drive you carried, a copy of all your gathered evidence. The precise location of the actual clock's eye camera, now in police evidence, waiting for the right prompt. You had anticipated this, the final, desperate move of a cornered architect. You underestimate me, you said, your voice low but firm, your eyes darting between the orchestrator and the advancing enforcers. I didn't come here unprepared. The truth is already out there, just waiting for the trigger. And you, my friend, are about to pull it. The orchestrator's calm facade finally fractured. A flicker of genuine alarm crossed his features. What have you done? He demanded, rising slowly, his hand reaching for a concealed button on his desk. I've ensured that if I don't walk out of here, your entire empire crumbles, you declared, your gaze unwavering. The world will know about the politician's complicity, your trafficking. The journalist's murder. And it will all start with the image captured by the clock's eye, the final moments of a truth seeker, brought to light. The enforcers lunged, but you were already moving, a lifetime of street brawls and tactical training kicking in. This wasn't just about redemption anymore, it was about survival, and the desperate, burning need to expose the rot that festered beneath the veneer of power. The fight had just begun. Your knuckles throbbed, a dull counterpoint to the sharp ache in your ribs, but the three enforcers lay scattered, groaning, their initial ferocity replaced by the whimpers of defeat. One clutched a twisted arm, another nursed a bleeding lip, the third lay motionless, a knot of unconscious muscle and bone. You stood over them, chest heaving, the adrenaline beginning its slow, insidious retreat, leaving behind a profound weariness. The silence that followed was broken only by your ragged breaths and the distant, growing wail of sirens. Blue and red strobed through the grimy windows, painting the stark walls in fleeting, urgent hues. Your gaze swept the room, taking in the overturned tables, the scattered files, the broken chair that had served as an improvised weapon. Footsteps pounded down the corridor, a cacophony of heavy boots. The door burst open, and a swarm of uniforms flooded the room. His hand instinctively went to his sidearm. You raised your hand slowly, palms open, a gesture of surrender and exhaustion. "It's over," you rasped, your voice hoarse. They were trying to silence him. You gestured with a chin to the corner, where the terrified informant, the one who had finally cracked under pressure and agreed to testify, huddled, trembling. The detective's gaze swept over the scene again, then back to you. "Marcus Thorne," he stated, his voice devoid of warmth, "you're a long way from home." "Just finishing what I started," you replied, a bitter taste in your mouth. Officers moved quickly, securing the enforcers, their faces grim as they assessed the damage. You watched, a detached observer in your own drama, as the pieces of this fractured night began to slot into place. Then, a voice cut through the controlled chaos. "There! He has it!" Your head snapped towards the sound. He pointed a trembling finger at your hand. You looked down. Clutched tight, almost forgotten, was the encrypted data chip you had ripped from the pocket of the lead enforcer, the very reason for this brutal confrontation. "The evidence," you said, holding it up, the small, metallic rectangle glinting under the harsh facility lights. "This contains everything. Financial transfers, coded communications, the full extent of their operation. It links the politician directly to the journalist's murder, and to the organization pulling the strings." The lead detective hesitated for a fraction of a second, his eyes flicking from the chip to the enraged aide, then back to you. He nodded to an officer, who carefully took the chip from your grasp, placing it in an evidence bag. "Marcus Thorne," the detective began again, his tone softening imperceptibly, "you're coming with us. We have questions." "I expected nothing less," you said, a ghost of a smile touching your lips. As they led you away, past the murmuring officers and the stunned facility staff, you caught a glimpse of the politician's aide, his face now pale, his earlier bravado completely gone. He knew. He knew you had one. Hours blurred into a relentless stream of questions, your answers precise, unwavering. Each word was a brick in the wall of justice you were painstakingly rebuilding. Outside, the world was waking up to the scandal. You could hear the distant clamor of reporters, their shouts echoing faintly from beyond the secured perimeter. News channels would be ablaze with the story, the politician's carefully constructed image crumbling in real time. The initial reports would be sensational, a disgraced detective's vigilante justice, but as the evidence surfaced, as the data chip was decrypted, the narrative would shift. The truth, finally, would begin its slow, inexorable march. When they finally released you, it was dawn, the sky a bruised purple over the city. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of exhaust fumes and damp concrete. You stepped out into a chaotic scene, a throng of reporters, cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward like weapons. Their questions were a barrage, a deafening wave of noise. Marcus Thorne. What happened in there? Is the politician involved? Are you being reinstated? You pushed through them, a silent, weary warrior. The lead detective, waiting by an unmarked car, gave you a curt nod. We'll be in touch, Thorne. This isn't over. You knew it wasn't. Not for the politician, not for the organization, and certainly not for you. The adrenaline had completely drained, replaced by a profound emptiness, a raw exhaustion that settled deep in your bones. Every muscle ached, every bruise pulsed with a dull throb. You felt the weight of the past few days, the years of disgrace, the burning need for vindication. Redemption. Was this it? You had exposed the rot, yes, but at what cost? Your freedom was tenuous, your reputation still fractured. The face of the murdered journalist, sharp and intelligent, flashed in your mind. You had avenged them, given their truth a voice, but the personal toll was immense. The fight had been won, the battle for justice was just beginning, but the war within you, the one against your own demons, felt far from over. The path ahead was shrouded, but at least, for the first time in a long time, it felt like a path you could choose. The profound emptiness lingered. A hollow echo in the chambers of your chest. Every fiber of your being felt wrung out, a damp cloth twisted of all its strength. The dull throb in your bruises was a constant, low murmur, a testament to the jagged edges of the recent past. You sat, not moving, not thinking, simply existing in the quiet aftermath, the world outside a distant hum. Your vehicle, a borrowed, nondescript sedan, cut through the pre-dawn hush, its engine a soft growl against the city's slumber. Each mile carried you further from the immediate danger, yet closer to the quiet reckoning you sought. The facility itself rose from the industrial outskirts like a concrete monolith, stark and unyielding, its windows like vacant eyes. Fluorescent lights hummed with an incessant drone, casting a pallid glow on the muted beige walls. You moved through the sterile corridors, a ghost among the living, your steps echoing faintly on the polished linoleum. A uniformed officer, his face etched with weary patience, nodded you through a series of checkpoints. You were here for a finality, a tangible endpoint to the labyrinthine chase. Then, you saw it. Through the reinforced glass of a waiting area, a small, grainy television screen flickered with the morning news. The anchor's voice, though muted, carried the weight of consequence. Images flashed, the politician, once so formidable, now a figure of disgrace, his face grim as he was escorted into a vehicle. Text scrolled beneath, investigation into campaign finance fraud, illicit lobbying, and obstruction of justice. The name of the organization, once whispered in the shadows, now emblazoned across the screen, linked to a sprawling network of illicit activities, its elite members facing a cascade of indictments. A quiet tremor ran through you, not of triumph, but of profound, unsettling relief. This was it. The unraveling. The long-sought justice for the journalist, whose sharp mind and relentless pursuit of truth had cost him everything. You watched as the anchor detailed the arrests, the leaked documents, the testimonies of those brave enough to speak. The names of the players, once untouchable, were now fodder for the morning headlines. The edifice, built on lies and power, had begun its slow, inevitable collapse. The reveal was not a thunderclap, but a slow, dawning light, illuminating the dark corners you had painstakingly exposed. The journalist's ghost, which had clung to you like a second skin for so long, seemed to recede, a silent nod of acknowledgement. You had delivered on your unspoken promise. The news, though damning, spoke of initial arrests, ongoing investigations. The organization, a hydra with countless heads, would not be felled by a single blow. Its tendrils ran deep, far deeper than this initial sweep could reach. The beast was wounded, but still breathing, its eyes still watching from the periphery. A colleague, her face a mask of exhaustion that mirrored your own, approached you, a thick file clutched in her hand. "They're processing the last of them," she murmured, her voice rough. "The ones caught in the politician's net, used as leverage." She nodded towards a group of individuals emerging from a side door. Their faces a mixture of bewilderment and fragile hope. Among them, a young man, whose coerced testimony had nearly derailed your efforts, now walked with a tentative freedom, his eyes wide with disbelief. Seeing him, a pawn in a game far beyond his understanding, step into the uncertain light of a new day, solidified something within you. This was the tangible outcome, the quiet ripple of justice reaching those it had long ignored. You thought of the badge, once polished and proud, now a relic of a different life. This case, this brutal, relentless descent into the heart of corruption, had been your crucible. You hadn't sought redemption, not truly, only the truth. But in that relentless pursuit, in the quiet, methodical dismantling of a powerful lie, you had found something akin to it. A purpose, rekindled and burning brighter than before. The path ahead remained a tapestry. Unstitched, threads hanging loose, no clear pattern emerging. You were no longer the disgraced detective, but what were you instead? A man who had seen the deepest rot and still chosen to fight. The world had shifted, subtly, irrevocably. The quiet peace settling within you was not one of blissful ignorance, but of hard-won understanding. The ghosts of the past were not entirely vanquished, but they were no longer screaming. They were merely echoes, distant and fading. You turned from the flickering screen, from the quiet hum of the facility, and walked towards the exit. You took a deep breath, the scent of exhaust and damp concrete filling your lungs. The fight was not over, not truly. But you, Marcus Thorne, were ready for whatever came next. Your footsteps, though weary, held a new, quiet determination. The weight was still there, a different kind of burden now, but one you were finally strong enough to carry.